Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Between the Pillars, the Fisher Library's video podcast. This afternoon, I've got outreach librarian John Shoesmith with me. Hello, John.
The tables have turned.
Swapping places today, yes. Welcome.
Thank you.
Very happy that we finally get to talk to you instead of you asking the rest of us about how things are going. I wonder what you have brought for us today.
Well, if you remember, Liz, about a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, actually, we did something similar. The only time I've ever been on a guest on the podcast is when we were both working remotely, couldn't come to the library. And I talked about the Canadian Fine Press, the Canadian Private Press, and I was showing things on PowerPoint slides. So I figured because that seemed inadequate to especially the topic of the private press, that we'd do another episode that features some of the things that I love here at the Fisher Library, namely our artist books, our fine press materials, and actually handle the materials, which is a lot more fun than looking at them on slides. So I figured this would be a good opportunity for me to be a guest on the podcast. I also couldn't find anybody to be on the podcast, so so I figured I might as well step in and take one for the team. So, and I think you're going to be on one in a few weeks. So. Not that you've made it a promise, but hopefully you'll be on the next one of the next ones. Exactly. So I wanted to talk about some of my keen interests here at the Fisher Library, namely the private press and fine press materials.
It's definitely better to see this material in person, so I'm glad
exactly. And I did bring a few examples of which we could talk about in a minute.
So you typically buy the small and fine press material for the Fisher. You're one of us that focuses on that area.
Yeah, I mean, and you're also one of the people that is that's very knowledgeable around this area, this really important collecting area at the Fisher. I always like to remind people, because especially we've had a number of guests on talking about specifically some of our older material, because when they do come to the library, they always think, oh, you must have a lot of old books. And of course we have a lot of old books, but I do like to remind people that rare books and special collections encompasses more than just quote unquote old books. It includes things like the fine press or the small press. We collect a lot of chapbooks, for example. You would know better than anybody else who catalogs a lot of this material how many chapbooks and pamphlets we have from various small press fairs that we've attended over the years, along with our now retired colleague Don McLeod, who used to purchase a lot of this material for us. To me this material that we have here is just as important as some of the other kind of tier A things that people talk about at the library, whether it's our Shakespeare First Folio, whether it's our Caxtons, our medieval manuscripts, which are currently on display right now. These are important things to add to our collections, because not all libraries are collecting them. So we're trying to create a real comprehensive collection of private press and fine press materials. So it's fun stuff to buy, I would say.
It's fun stuff to catalog too. It really is a pleasure to be able to go through, even to the limited extent that you're able to go through it when you're doing the cataloging.
And one of the things we always tell people that are especially young bookmakers who are making books for the first time, include a colophon. So basically the information that's at the back of a book, because it really helps. It particularly helps librarians when they're wanting to discuss the material.
The catalogers when you're creating these works.
Exactly. So they used to teach a course at the iSchool on bookmaking, and that was the only other thing that the instructor always emphasizes at the very beginning: create a colophon. So it's very helpful. But as you said, it's we've been purchasing a lot of this material over the years, and hopefully we're going to the Antiquarian Book Fair next week at the AGO. For those who are watching today, next weekend at the AGO, they are having the Toronto International Antiquarian Book Fair will be happening at the AGO, and it's not just old books that's on sale. There'll be a lot of fine press stuff, small press materials. So
a lot of ephemera as well.
A lot of ephemera. So Liz and I will be on the lookout for a lot of material.
Yes.
So why don't I instead of talking, I want to show some of the material we have here.
Yes.
So let me put the document camera. Let me get the document camera going here. There we go. Can you see that?
Yeah, it's great.
I'm mostly going to focus in on this session on talking about Canadian material, but I did want to specifically talk about this particular item, because people, I don't know if this happens to you a lot, Liz, when people are coming through, tours are coming through, or classes. one of the questions we invariably get is, what's your favorite item in the library? And
Yes.
and often it changes, especially because when you're cataloging so much material, something you'll come across something thinking, wow, this is really cool. This is now my favorite item at the library.
Mm.
For the longest time, though, I've been telling people this is my favorite item at the library for a number of reasons, which I'll explain in a minute. So this looks like James Joyce's Finnegans Wake. Have you ever read Finnegans Wake?
I haven't.
No. My message, usually I tell people try it, but you probably won't get through 2 pages of it. It's very dense. Some people consider it one of the most complex texts in English literature.
I
Pretty much,
certainly wouldn't try reading this copy though.
and we'll show you why. So this is a 4-volume set of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake. It's actually a 1965 edition that was, as we'll see here. Basically, what she did, the artist, I apologize if I don't get her name pronounced properly, Yemena Perez Grobet, who's from Barcelona.
Mhm.
She is an artist that works in several mediums, but one of the mediums she does work in is books. She actually has her own press called Nowhere Man Presses. So what she did here, this book is 10 years in the making, almost 10 years in the making. What she did is she took a 1965 Faber and Faber edition of Finnegans Wake, cut the entire thing up, cut it in strips, and ended up sewing it back together again. So basically, when you see a book, this is a classic artist book in the fact that this is a one-off. There's only one copy of this that's in the world that happens to be here at the library. It took her several years to sew together. If people are interested in the creation of this book, there's actually a YouTube video of her working on this, which we'll post in the show notes at the bottom.
She basically turned all of the text into thread and knitted it with needles.
Exactly, and it's a pity actually. The document camera probably doesn't capture how really wonderful and how it feels too. It really feels like it has such a unique feel to this book. But basically, what she's done is she's taken the idea of the difficulty and the complexity of the language and rendered it in material form. Very exciting book. And so the story behind this is that when I was in New York City in March 2020, which a date which may be familiar to many people. I was there for McLuhan conference at the New York University, and at the same time, the Antiquarian Book Fair was going on in New York City. And I went on the Friday or Saturday, I can't remember what day it was, came across this book at one of the booksellers' tables, and I thought, oh my God, we have to have this book. Even though I was not there I was there for the McLuhan conference, I was not there to be purchasing materials. I didn't have a budget. But I explained to him the reason why this book was so suited for the Fisher Library. We collect artist books, so that's an important part of what we collect at the library. We have a fantastic Irish literature collection, the Delury collection. So we already have somewhere along the lines of probably a dozen different editions of Finnegans Wake. But we also have the Marshall McLuhan Library. And the Marshall McLuhan Library includes about 5 or 6 editions of Finnegans Wake. McLuhan was very much a Joycean and also claimed to have cracked the code behind Finnegans Wake. And so it just fit into our library in so many different ways. That's one of the things I love about our library, is that you can create all these different connections between all the different books and collections we have here. And this sort of fits in perfectly with those 3 areas: artist books, Irish literature, and McLuhan. I think McLuhan would love this edition. I think he would have really gone mad about seeing this type of book. So
I know she's working from Barcelona, but I wonder if she's also playing with the idea of the story as a yarn.
It might well be. That's true. There's a pretty extensive artist statement in the book itself, and her website's pretty amazing. She sent me a lovely letter when she heard that we had purchased it for the library, because she said when she created this book, she really wanted it to go to the right home. I don't think she wanted to sell it to an individual. She wanted it to be in an institution, in an academic institution. And when I explained to her all those different connections, especially the McLuhan one, she got very excited and was very, very happy that it ended up here at the library. So even though I didn't purchase it at that book fair, it was about a year later. When I explained to the bookseller all these different connections, he said, "You know what? Let me put it on hold for you. I'll give you a year and let me know within that year whether you can purchase the book." And I think it was probably within 8 months. I said, "I've got the money. let's buy it. So he was very happy to have placed it here at the Fisher Library as well. So again, something that I love. I love showing. I've been showing this to a lot of classes, and probably will continue to do so, especially classes around artist books and unique books, because it is such a unique object.
And we'll put a link to a video of the artist working on the book or the artist statement in the video description.
For sure. So I want to go now. We'll go to the Canadiana topic, Canadiana portion of this episode. I wonder if that's as zoomed out as we can. Yeah. So one of the things we love purchasing here at the library. I mean, we do focus in. We almost this is the Finnegans Wake is a bit of an exception because we try to spend our limited resources on Canadiana and Canadian artists, Canadian bookmakers. Even though we do, I feel, need a representative sampling of books from around the world, we do try to spend the majority of our funds on Canadian works. So I brought two here for us. These are fairly recent purchases by two of my favorite bookmakers here in Canada, Alan Steen and Walter Baczynski of Shanty Bay Press. So let's start with Alan. Alan is an artist, works in several mediums. Actually got his start as a creating stained glass windows in Toronto, if you can believe it. There's actually, if you drive down Huron, one of the schools has that stained glass windows. Yes. Not Huron, on St. George, when it turns into Beverly. He one of the windows he created back in the 1970s. But really got an interest in making books around the early 1980s. So we can marry so many of his interests, both artistically. He works in woodcuts, and he does letterpress printing. So this is his most recent example. He often works with poets. Some people might know his work. He's done a couple books with Al Purdy. He did one with P.K. Page. His book prior to this one was actually working with various prose writers who were writing about Georgian Bay. So in Spirit Lake, that one's called. So, but this is a collaboration he did with a Newfoundland poet named Des Walsh. And Alan actually spends, if you see the imprint, I don't know if you can see the imprint. This actually is published in two areas, in Old Bonaventure and in Parry Sound. Alan mostly lives in Parry Sound during the year. His wife owns the bookshop actually up in Parry Sound. But he also spends quite a bit of time now in Newfoundland and Old Bonaventure. And I was actually fortunate enough to spend some time there this summer in his home, which was just lovely. So this is a collaboration with Des Walsh, who we met, I think, a few years ago, and they decided to collaborate on a project together. And Alan's usual method is that he gets the poems from the poet, from the writer, won't collaborate with them at all in terms of how he's illustrating the works. He just illustrates them to what he feels, how they should be interpreted, and then only after the fact does he show the poet or the writer his finished product. These are beautiful books. There's I believe there's about 18 to 20 woodcuts in this one. He always colors the frontispiece of the books. So there's, I believe, 60 copies of this book in total that he produced. Really beautiful. I mean, as I said, a document camera doesn't quite do these books justice in terms of how the pages feel, in terms of how well, how great the letter pressing is. But as you'll see, he really does. His woodcuts are so charming, so wonderful. And I was telling you, Liz, earlier that finally going to Newfoundland, I kind of understand Alan's sensibility that much more, whether it's the oceans, whether it's the cemeteries, whether it's the churches, whether it's just the general landscape, the weather. Everything about Newfoundland is really well expressed in these wonderful and amazing woodcuts. We're very fortunate.
Gorgeous, and they're very dynamic.
They're really wonderful. And we're very fortunate too that Alan donates his wood blocks to us. So he hasn't donated the wood blocks for this particular book yet. That'll probably be in 2 or 3 years time. And he also includes all of the original charcoal sketches. So he'll do the original sketching, and then he'll do the woodcut, and then there's several proofs that he makes before the final product. So you really get to see the entire kind of soup to nuts creation of these really wonderful private press, hand press books.
That makes them very useful for teaching.
Very
They share
useful.
all parts of the process of production.
Exactly, because I mean, as you well know, I mean, the study of bookmaking and the history of books is becoming quite an interesting area of scholarship, especially at University of Toronto and through Massey College
Mhm.
with the book history and print culture program. There's really a lot of interest in understanding the creation behind books, and Allen's archives is a real treasure trove for a lot of that
Mm.
stuff. And the books are just wonderful. They really are. They're so
Gorgeous.
nice to touch. The binding is usually done by Toronto binder Don Taylor. So Don Taylor does all the binding for Allen's books.
I noticed that in the colophon, I believe he thanked Don for creating the seaweed style paste paper
Yes.
covers.
Yes. So
Beautiful.
yeah, really,
Can you
really
see the
wonderful.
covers again for a minute?
Yes. So those
Yeah, really nice.
very, very nice. And one more example that I wanted to show of one of our favorites. So both of these. So we recently had a small and fine press fair. We have one every 2 years. This one was the first one in 3 years due to
Very successful.
this one was very successful. I think there was so much pent up demand since we hadn't had one for 3 years. Normally it's every 2 years, but for obvious reasons we couldn't have them we couldn't have one last year. And we had pretty much everybody I asked ended up participating, save for one who had to cancel at the last minute due to an illness. But we had somewhere in the lines of 600 people come through. And Walter Baczynski, who from Shanty Bay, who did this book along with his wife Janice, ended up selling, I think, 3 or 4 books. So for him, it was a very successful day out. I think for all the bookmakers, it was a successful day out. So I wanted to show this one because I want to pair it with the Alan Steen specifically because it deals similarly with Canadian poets. This was a collection of 14 poems by Canadian poets. Everybody from Margaret Atwood, I think Bliss Carman is recognized. Rue Borson, Barry Dempster, Douglas Lepan, a lot of writers who actually papers are here at the Fisher Library, which is kind of a nice little connection as well. So, Walter taught printmaking at University of Guelph, but he's also an accomplished painter, and he got into bookmaking probably about 15, 20 years ago with his partner Janice. And Janice does all the typesetting, she does all the letter pressing, and Walter does all the illustrations. So his primary technique is pochoir. For those that don't know what pochoir is, it's essentially just stenciling. And he also does liner cuts and wood engravings in this book. And again, I hate to say the document camera again doesn't do it justice. I do remind people that these books are here for you if you're interested in seeing any of them in our collection. They are here for public viewing as well. So again, really beautiful. So here's one by Bliss Carman. Really beautiful illustrations to go along with the poetry, with the letterpress work and the poetry. Some of these are just outstanding. They have a real. I was talking to you about this, Liz, earlier. They have a real sort of Tom Thompson feel as well, because they again Shanty Bay. They're up near Barrie, and they do spend a lot of time up north and doing a lot of sketching and painting. So a lot of the works reflect that.
Some of them have the qualities of paper cut works as well in all of the detail.
Exactly. So
extremely vibrant colors.
They are, and he was telling me that if you look at we love the blues, especially. I think when he was here dropping this book off, he was telling me that he can't source the blue anymore. So, which is sad because the blue is so vibrant. It's so vibrant on this cover and in the pages of the book. So
once it's gone.
Exactly. So again, these are the 2 most recent works by certainly 2 of my favorite bookmakers here in Canada, Alan Steen and Walter Baczynski. Wanted to show you 2 more things. Again, I love this cover. This is from one of our favorite, certainly one of, I think, Liz's favorite bookmakers was Roland Milroy. Roland Milroy runs Heavenly Monkey, or he now just refers to HM, out in Vancouver, British Columbia. He actually attended. Unfortunately, he couldn't come to the most recent book fair. But he did come to the one in 2019, which was great. It was great to have him here in Toronto and to interact with so many of the people that admire his work. And he admires so many of the other printers as well, the publishers. So
It's
this
really also a great opportunity for them to socialize with each other, since so many of them are admirers of each other's.
exactly. And actually, I was going to mention that too. I mean, one of the things I love about covering this area and buying in this area is that it really feels like a community. They're a community that root for each other, that
Mhm.
there's not much competition in terms of, oh, why is someone buying their book and not my book. Everybody seems happy. Everybody seems to collaborate. There's a lot of bartering that goes on as well with these books. So,
Mhm.
Walter may give Alan Steen a book, and Alan Steen will give him the book back. So there's no purchasing involved. They're trading each other's works. And so even though I'm not a printmaker or bookmaker, I kind of feel in my own way sort of a periphery member of this community because I do run the fair. I always try to take them out to lunch when they come to Toronto. And we always have these wonderful conversations about books and their process and what's coming out next. So I kind of feel my way that I'm a periphery member of the community, although I would never claim to be a full member since these are fantastic artists. And as many people know, I have very little artistic capability. I have an appreciation. How about that? Appreciation rather than ability. So this is an interesting work. I wanted to talk about two things in this little session, in this little section. One is about bibliographies and histories. So one of the projects I'm working on, and I'm going on research leave in a couple of months' time, is I'm going to be doing a history of the Canadian private press. As comprehensive as I can, going back to the earliest days of the printing of the private press in Canada. And I'm going to be using a lot of secondary sources, but I'm also going to be using these primary sources. A lot of the fine presses and the private presses have actually done their own bibliographies. They've written their own histories, and they've really packaged them in these beautiful, beautiful books. Heavenly Monkey is a great example too, because they do a lot of what I'd call reference books, whether it's about paper cutting, whether it's about colors, and they're
Paper folding.
paper folding, and they're really contained in these beautiful artistic packages at the same time. So it takes reference to another level, in my opinion. So Roland recently created this book called This Monkey's Gone to Heaven, and it's the checklist of Heavenly Monkey editions between 2000 and 2020. He said to me he doesn't know why he did this because it was quite an effort to put together. But the great thing about it, it's so unique because if you can see here, it's actually being individually annotated by I believe it's his friend Barbara Hodgson. So each copy of this bibliography, I think there's maybe 60 in total, is an individual product because each one has been annotated in a different way. So I'd love to see some of the other copies. And the thing about this, we were talking about this earlier as well, is that when these books come in, we look at them, we admire them, but we don't get to really sit down and read them like we should. And so one of the things I'm looking forward to when I go on my leave is being able to look through a book like this, read it really carefully, as I wouldn't be able to do when I'm not on research leave, and get a great appreciation for the history of Heavenly Monkey. So he's tipped in, he's inserted some sheets from past works that he's worked on, and he said it has the annotations. Roland is just such an interesting person, and really one of the finest bookmakers currently working in Canada, always doing something interesting. He's got a great blog as well. He updates his blog every month. Highly worth reading.
His blog has been very helpful when cataloging material from Heavenly Monkey.
Exactly.
Goes in great detail about the processes and the people involved, even more so sometimes than in the colophon.
Exactly. So extremely helpful. One more example from British Columbia is Jim Rimmer. As you can see, this has just recently been cataloged, so the bookplate hasn't been inserted yet. So this is from Jim Rimmer. Jim Rimmer ran a private press. Jim Rimmer was a graphic designer, did all sorts of things, but started his own press called Pie Tree Press, and didn't produce that many books. One book he did produce was a Mark Twain book, which we recently purchased as well. Actually, no, we recently got donated from Chester Grisky, who purchased it for us. So that was something we could add to our collection. But this is again, Jim Rimmer decided to write his own history of his own press, and packaged it in this beautiful fine press book. There is a commercial edition of this that Gaspereau Press did. But this was something that I always wanted to have, and finally came up. One of the people we purchased from, Jake Quinlan, out in Peterborough, who specializes in Canadian fine press, managed to source this for us and sold it to us recently. But again, Jim, it tells Jim's story about getting into the private press. He also was, I saved this page, Liz, because you were admiring it earlier.
Yes.
He also created typefaces. So let me just see if I can scoot this over a little bit. And so some of these typefaces, what does he say? Should I read it, Liz?
Sure.
Above are the popular types of the author's youth. Sorry about that. The matrices in his collection, which were put into service to make the type, had not been used for nearly half a century. It is possible they will never be used again. Their rugged dignity deserves one final casting and printing. So
I love that.
It's wonderful. And so these are some of the typecasts, the typefaces that Jim created over the years. So really wonderful. Again, I haven't had a chance to look through this book yet, to really go through it in depth, but I'm looking forward to digging into the history of Pie Tree Press as told through the person that created Pie Tree Press. So again, a great example of a private press book that is also useful for its content. Useful in terms of what I'm going to be using it for as well. I mentioned Gaspereau Press in terms, because he did the commercial version of that book. Let me see if I can bring this in, Liz. Okay, this is the last book we're going to show.
I had a lot of trouble cataloging this because it's quite large.
This is the box that it came in. As you'll see, it's the letter. Can you see letter C? It's the letter C because there's actually only 26 editions of this book, so each one carries its own individual letter on the box. Box over here.
And it's a wooden case.
It's a wooden case, yes. As we can hear. I had a feeling I'm going to have a hard time really getting a sense of this book as well, because it is so large. So let's get to the first page. Let's get to the title page. Can you read Latin?
Not well, no.
Basically, I'll read the second part. An exhibit showing of the wood type at Gaspereau Press. So what Andrew Steeves, who's the proprietor of Gaspereau Press, what he did is he took all the wood type that he had at Gaspereau Press, and he decided to make this beautiful type specimen book, using the 150 wood type specimens that he had on hand at Gaspereau. The history behind him getting all these wood types is actually interesting, because these wood types originally belonged to Glenn Galuska, who Glenn Galuska was a long-time private press producer himself. Worked in Toronto for many, many years. Actually got a start at Coach House Press. He was originally from the United States, worked at Coach House Press, started his own private press, currently had 2 or 3 Vandercooks in his home just down the street on Harvard, in his kitchen. There was the community back then would include people like Will Reuter, who was from the Aliquando Press. Michael Terosian was part of that community as well, so learned a lot from Glenn. So when Glenn died a number of years ago, Andrew, he willed all his typefaces to Andrew. Glenn did, and so what Andrew's done with this is create a type specimen book.
That's one of my favorite right there.
This one?
Sit and read books, yeah.
Hey, sit and read books. Again, it's a magnificent effort, a beautiful, beautiful book. I love type specimen books, actually. I think they're, especially because they're very quirky in terms of what they decide to cast.
And this is even more creative than most, which are in themselves usually very creative.
Exactly. So just a really sort of stunning book. One of my personal favorites right now as well, because it is such it's an amazing work. It's pretty monumental, actually. Quick stop rest. So he does, you can't see it here, but at the bottom he identifies all of the individual typefaces as well. So let me go back on camera, because that ends the show and tell portion of this. But again, as I said, this material is, I think I can probably speak for you as well, some of the favorite material that we have here at the library. It really speaks to us in a lot of the ways. Some of the other material, I mean, obviously we love all the material here at Fisher, but this is stuff that's really, it's close to my heart, close to Liz's heart as well. So I know it's always a pleasure for Liz when she gets the catalog.
It is.
And
I
she's
envy getting to spend all that extra time with the material.
yes, and it's going to be great starting in January when I will be able to sit in the reading room, not have to answer email, and just pour over a lot of these editions. Because as I said, we don't get the opportunity like we should sometimes to really invest invest in reading a lot of the material that's being produced by these fine press folks. So it'll be great. I'm looking forward to my leave.
Some really wonderful material that you've shown us today, John.
Thanks, Liz. And this is and Liz, since I will be on Live, Liz will be actually doing we'll be doing the podcast beginning in January. So so this is kind of an introduction for Liz taking over hosting the podcasting duties.
Trying my best to fill your shoes.
You'll be fine.
Well, thank you for sharing all that material with us today. And
thanks, Liz.
We look forward to talking to you again after your leave.
I hope so, because what I hope to do is we'll probably turn this into an exhibition about the private press. So it'll be a lot of fun to have this material on display. And I do like to remind people as well that, you know, the document camera is one thing. If anybody's interested in this material, please come and view it yourself, because it is here. You know, it's here for everybody. And I always like to share this material with people that have a real interest in Canadian, in the history of the Canadian private press.
You'll be showing some of the material, or have been showing some of the material in classes just this week.
This week, I've been working with George Walker's OCAD class. Another class is coming in today. That's another reason why I had it on a book truck. Ready for George's class. So I figured, well, since it's on a book truck, let's do a podcast about it. So, and it's been fun. So I appreciate, Liz, that you indulging me and chatting about this stuff.
Always happy to look at this beautiful material and chat with you.
Perfect.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to Between the Pillars, and we hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. And thank you, John.
Thanks, Liz. Bye.
Bye, everyone.